Good afternoon, Sean here, Mountains Garage. I had a couple hours this afternoon and I'm going to assemble the shift linkage in both transmissions, the Race 475 and the low drag Turbo 400. I need to come up with a catchy name that just blankets all of them. Maybe just Turbo 400. That rolls off the tongue. Anyway, if you have been around transmissions a while, especially if you work on them, many people will tell you they think their pan is leaking, the transmission pan, because they look underneath and the pan's wet. Where a large percentage of the time, it's all the fluid connections above that. Connections and pass-throughs on the Turbo 400, cooler lines, dipstick, speedometer, tail housing gasket, electrical connector for the kickdown, and the good old linkage seal. And of course the front pump and seal and everything up there. So all that stuff, gravity's going to take it down, and it's seldom the pan. It gets blamed a lot. I see it all over the forums. It's a good chance it's one of the culprits I just mentioned. Well, that's why it's important when you're rebuilding a transmission to take the time to service all the seals. They all come in the kit. There's no sense leaving them in the package and putting them on a shelf. Put them in the transmission and you'll be happier in the long run. Now I'm going to show you some tools that are meant to cheat the system as far as the linkage seal goes, and I think that they're not a good idea. Let's just get into why, and we'll go over the parts. The other night, from the comfort of my recliner, I decided to order 30 linkage seals, and they just came individually boxed. So I got them all bagged up and left 2 out for today's activities. First off, you're going to need a shift shaft. This one came out of the 400 I stripped on Saturday in the video, the non-HD Pontiac. It didn't look like this. It was very rusty, but it cleaned up nicely. So that's usable, and that'll go back in the same transmission. For the 400, I'm just going to use a brand new Sonex I have. I have a couple used ones, but this one's clean sitting here on the bench, and today it gets the nod. Interesting to note, this fits all Turbo 400s, lengthwise, and all the early 4L80Es until they went to the external neutral safety switch, which would slide over the end. And the shaft actually turns the switch. You could put the long shaft in the Turbo 400, but it would just stick out. It would work. Everything else dimensionally is the same. So this fits 4L80E, the early ones, and all Turbo 400s. You're going to need the 2 nails, one for each transmission, that go through the linkage to hold it in the case. These are nice, unbent. There's no need to ever bend it. We've gone over that before. You need to be able to disassemble it to change the seal. If you have to change the seal in the car by removing the shift shaft, then yes, you have to bend the nail to get it past the pump. But it's easily doable, and you can straighten it back out afterwards. But in normal service, when you have the pump removed, just take the nail in and out. The Rooster and pawl combination, you'll see a lot of wear on the pin where it passes through the Rooster. That's called the Rooster because if I flipped it over, it looks like a rooster. So check for wear right there. They seldom wear on this end. I had one broken the other day. Big chunk missing out of it. But same with the pawl guide. It only goes in the case. It would bolt on either way, but it wouldn't fit. So essentially you can only put it one way, and there's be unfinished bolts holding it in. If it's a finished bolt or it looks dirty or rusty, it's probably been a pan bolt. The ones that are inside on the rear servo cover and the pawl guide usually still look like new because they spent their life in oil. I've gone over disassembly before, but when I break the Rooster free from the shaft when I'm disassembling the transmission, there'll be burrs right around here that will prevent you from pulling it through the case. So I gently file it and keep trying it, pulling it out of the case, because it'll be loose in here, but it'll get tight right there, and it's going to remove aluminum from the case if you force it through there. So it should slide right in and out. You need to exercise a little bit of caution when removing the old seal from the case. This area here is somewhat fragile. If you are using a big screwdriver to pry it out, it's also easy to scratch the bore in the case. I like to use my seal remover. I like using the short side, and even when I use that, I have to be careful that the hook doesn't gouge into the case. So you got to kind of get the seal, pick up a little bit, and just rotate it out. And you're applying force to this area again, so be careful. It would be a shame to waste the case trying to get the seal out. There's no way to drive it from the back side. It has to be hooked out of here from this side. And there are some tools available designed to help you remove the seal with the transmission assembled and to drive it back in. This Matco one I've never had out of the package. I bought it for a 97 3/4 ton that I had. I ended up just dismantling it and doing it the correct way because I found the shaft to be pretty rusty on the outside. This is off a relatively clean transmission, and this area here is probably going to scuttle your new seal when you drive it over there. If you can get in there and try to clean it around the case, I just showed you where it sticks out. Good luck, but it's, I don't know. I guess it's worth a try if you're desperate to try this style tool. This is meant to thread in and hook the old seal. And this actual kit here is for the short shaft, the actual Turbo 400s. This one is for the neutral safety style, 97 and up according to the Matco paperwork. I've never had this out of the package. I've owned it 15 years. I took this out of the package the other day because I thought it would be nice to actually, instead of making a driver for the seal, because I've put in hundreds and hundreds with my 1/2-inch snap-on socket that I've had since I was a teenager, because I always have the 1/2-inch socket on the bench. If I make this a regiment and use this to install it, I have to go get it. Again, I already have the 1/2-inch socket in my hand, so, but this required this much modification to even make it usable, but this is a cheap tool. Anyway, I haven't tried this. I should try this one day just to see if it works. Just for kicks, I will actually do that. And it came with a linkage seal that I wouldn't trust, and apparently a float gauge. So that's just how the package was delivered to me. Interesting. So I need to bust this driver out and see if it's more usable than this one. This one's now usable, but in fact, I'm going to use it for the first time in just a minute. So I went and got the knife and busted it out of its home. It's nothing but a piece of pipe with a Matco logo, and it's technically too big. I don't believe it would actually put the seal into its final resting place. It's only slightly smaller than the OD of the seal, and when I put it in the case, it stops before the seal would stop. So I think it's a poorly designed. I'm surprised by Matco. I expected it with the cheap one, but I'll give it a try anyway. As expected, my modified driver could get it in beyond and make it hit the stop where it was originally. And the Matco one hits the case and doesn't let the seal go all the way in. So I guess if you want to run the seal out further than it was from the factory, then that tool's awesome. I'll put it in the lathe and cut it down. But my newly modified driver works really nice. I might continue to use it and save my poor socket from getting beat on anymore. Although here it is, after literally hundreds of seals and transmission disassembly. Probably the most overworked socket that I have. Never been split, never been replaced. Vintage from the early 80s. Now, I know that you know the next words out of my mouth. Lube. I just dip it in and put a little bit on the inside of the shaft. The seal rides way out where my thumb is, but it's going to lubricate the hole on the way in. And it should be smooth as butter. Everything's installed in both cases. Let's go over the orientation of the parts. The pawl guide has a guide side and a flat side. You can't put this on the other way. I guess you could put it on with this facing up, but that should scream out wrong. This is correct. This actually guides the pawl toward the center of the transmission, pushes the pawl in. It's actually shoving the whole thing sideways. That's the noise you hear. And a side note, you can go ahead and assemble everything like this. In every position except this, the lower gear unit will fit in. If you left it in park like this, you're going to have trouble. So just don't do that, and you're good to go. The spring has a flat side that goes around the pawl, and you can see it hooking around that way. And the round side goes around the case this direction. This is the way it came from the factory. You can make it fit the other way. This is the way it belongs. The pawl itself Goes down underneath and faces toward the center of the transmission. Same with the pin that's going to engage the manual valve. When I assemble the nut, I put the Rooster head down against the case and then I tighten the nut. And when I'm all done, I put the nail in. Now I'm going to have this transmission upside down, servicing the rear bushing and working back there. When I'm done, I'm going to make sure the nail is still in place, or if I want, I can take it out and put it back in afterwards. But this is how everything should look. Everything should work. Just like that. This cup plug on the outside of the case is to service the parking pawl if you had to remove it. When I do remove it, I pry down there from the inside after I take the clip off, and it pushes the cup plug out of the case, and you can sometimes save it. It's seldom removed unless you're scrapping the case or there's actually something wrong with the parking pawl. Pretty rare, but in both these cases, in the case of both cases, the cup plug itself, while it wasn't rusted through, was rusty colored. So I took some clear RTV and pushed it in there with my finger and let it dry. If I didn't show it to you, you'd never know, but just in case, I don't want it exposed to the weather anymore. I don't want it to rust out. This should take care of it. During the process of assembling this transmission and the other one, and all the other projects going on in my shop, as I work along, toward the end goal, however long it's going to take, I don't leave anything loose. If I do, I'm going to mark it. So I know I've tightened the parking pawl guide, I've tightened the shaft nut. I'm not going to try to remember, hey, I'll do it when I put the valve body on. I do it now. That's the way I do it. Otherwise, mentally, I'd have way too many things to keep track of. I'd rather have to loosen it up for some reason than to forget to ever tighten it. So that's how I deal with many projects going on at one time. Leave nothing loose. All right, so we're moving ahead slowly. We're going over everything in detail. If you haven't noticed, that was many requests I received, but please slow down and break it down piece by piece. And I have no problem doing that because that's the way my brain works anyway. So we're inching ahead. It's important to remember this is the fun part. You've earned this. You got everything clean. Now it's fun. It's putting it together and just making sure the clearances are right, and everything's going to be honeymoon. Speaking of honeymoon, got myself a package. Hipster's Brake, automatic transmission design. From the moment I placed the order online, they have been in contact with me, keeping me abreast through the weekend or so process of getting it to me. It's a thing of beauty, made with pride in Wisconsin, just like it says on the instruction sheet. I downloaded the instruction sheet for this is a first gear leave trans brake going in the 475. I'm going to order a 1+2, so it'll be first or second gear leave. Essentially, I've read the instructions because I downloaded those as well, so I know how to build that transmission. It'll be ready to accept it. I just need to get off my butt and order another one, because at the time I was only building one for myself, and now I'm building two. I don't even know why I need two, other than to make it for you guys. So I'm proud to have this. Proud of my country, because there's men like this or women like this with a great company doing things that are awesome. So makes me well up with pride. Proud to be American when things like this happen. So, and again, the final product, these are now less expensive than the imported ones from your major parts warehouses. The price on the ones from the two big places in Ohio are now over $500. This was less than $500 with shipping. So you can't beat it. And if I have any problem, I know how to get a hold of the guy. So like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. I appreciate you. And we're going to continue moving forward. Next is the rear bushing, rear bearing, because we're going to put in a thrust bearing in the bottom of the case, and probably both lower units, if the other one shows up. It didn't show up today, but it should be here tomorrow. I hope.